Good morning. In today's headlines, as calls for humanitarian aid in Gaza grow, the Hamas terrorist organization blocks evacuation routes. We have the latest on the Israel-Hamas war.
President Biden has some stern words on the future of the terrorist group Hamas, while also emphasizing the importance of a future Palestinian state. We have more on the U.S. response to the war in Israel.
Meanwhile, the pressure is on to find a new House Speaker. Congressman Jim Jordan won the nomination, but does he have the votes to win the gavel?
More than 270 Americans have safely landed in Florida after being stranded in Israel. Governor Ron DeSantis hopes to evacuate even more Americans in the coming days.
The FBI is warning about domestic threats linked to the Israel-Hamas war. At the same time, controversy has erupted over calls for the U.S. to accept Gaza refugees.
Good morning. Welcome to NTD. I'm Kevin Hogan.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Evelyn Lee. Today is Monday, October 16th. Happy Monday.
Yeah, we hope you had a great weekend. And as the conflict rages on overseas, protests in New York City this weekend actually did turn out to be relatively peaceful.
Right. There were some clashes here and there.
Yeah, 61 people were arrested, though. Yes.
And to our top news today, we're starting off with the latest on the war in Israel and the Gaza Strip.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken returned to Israel today. That's after several days of shuttle diplomacy between Arab states to mitigate risks of the war widening into a greater conflict. You'll be meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Isaac Herzog.
360,000 Israeli troops are setting up along the borders of Gaza and Lebanon. The siege of Gaza continues with water, food, and fuel supplies running low and demands growing for humanitarian aid to be allowed in.
As Israel renews its call for civilians in the north of Gaza to move south, Hamas is actively blocking civilians from leaving. The IDF says it killed multiple Hamas commanders this weekend, including the leader of the October 7th attacks, Ali Khadi.
In northern Israel, citizens within 1.25 miles of the Lebanese border are being evacuated. Residents from 28 communities will be moved to state-funded guest houses for the time being.
This after Iran-backed terrorist group Hezbollah claimed responsibility for multiple anti-tank missile attacks on an IFD post over the weekend. One Israeli civilian was killed. Military casualties were also reported.
Comments made on Sunday by Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas criticizing Hamas were removed and changed without an explanation.
A Palestinian news organization published the comments. They came during a phone call between Abbas and Venezuela's president. The two leaders were discussing Israel's bombing of Gaza.
President Abbas' original statement said actions and policies of the terrorist group Hamas do not represent Palestinian people.
A few hours later, the statement no longer referenced Hamas. It's unknown why the content was removed. There has been no comment by Abbas' office or by the newspaper.
And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis welcomed Americans back after they were stranded in Israel for 8 days.
Sunday's charter flight carried over 270 people, including 91 children.
First big plane load, 270 people here. I think if you were watching, you saw a lot of families with young kids. So a lot of these people were in a real pinch. They had no help. They were not able to get out of Israel. And the state of Florida stepped up and answered the call.
Florida partnered with search and rescue nonprofit group Project Dynamo and sent the plane to Israel.
This occurred as major airlines canceled flights in and out of Tel Aviv after the Hamas terrorist attacks.
Governor DeSantis says he expects more flights to bring Americans back home will be sent out in the coming days.
The U.S. State Department estimates that over 20,000 Americans are currently in Israel and Gaza. The Israeli military now estimates close to 200 hostages are being held by Hamas and other terrorists in Gaza. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has more on the current situation in Gaza and Israel.
With food, water, electricity, and fuel in Gaza running low, demands from world leaders and the United Nations are growing for humanitarian aid. The IDF released these images of UNICEF first aid kits used by Hamas terrorists in their attacks, with the caption "Humanitarian aid for the purpose of terrorism," along with harrowing body cam footage recovered from a Hamas terrorist on October 7th. Israeli President Isaac Herzog says efforts being made to remove Palestinian civilians are being countered by Hamas.
We are trying to help Palestinians in Gaza to go to a safe zone, whilst Hamas is trying to block them all the way through.
One resident north of Gaza City told IDF that Hamas was confiscating people's belongings, including car keys and IDs, to stop them from heading south. IDF spokesperson Jonathan Conricus shared aerial footage of a Hamas roadblock.
And this is the same two vehicles, and you can see the line of civilian vehicles trying to go from north to south, being blocked by two other vehicles. And that corresponds with intelligence and information we have from various sources.
At least 70 people were reported killed and around 200 injured in Gaza in an explosion on an evacuation route Friday. Preliminary examination by forensic analysts and other experts have raised questions about the explosion's origin. Conricus stated the IDF does not target civilians and did not target vehicles or people trying to heed their evacuation warning.
Specifically because we wanted people to go south, so it makes no sense for the IDF to have done it. Who would want to stop those same civilians? The same organization that did the roadblocks, Hamas.
Preliminary examination by forensic analysts and other experts have raised questions about the explosion's origin. Conricus cautioned against trusting information coming out of Gaza, as it is all authorized by Hamas, including casualties reported by the Gaza Ministry of Health.
And ask yourself, why was this information disseminated, and how does it serve Hamas and its propaganda purposes?
Conricus said in a Q&A on X Spaces Sunday, the IDF has assessed the footage and expects it to release proof it was done by Hamas in the coming days. He emphasized the IDF objective.
We are hunting their commandos, we are striking their infrastructure, and that is what we aim to continue to do. And I hope that people in the Muslim world will be able to look beyond Hamas propaganda and the lies on Al Jazeera and many other places and see the world a bit from our perspective as well. We have been attacked.
The IDF says Hamas has fired over 6,000 rockets indiscriminately at Israeli civilians since the war started. Conricus says prior to the war, Israel only supplied 9% of the water in Gaza, and that Hamas has stockpiles of fuel and an ability to generate electricity, but that they're saving it to run command centers and their other military activities instead of providing water to their civilians. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
Well, the border is supposedly open, Rafah, the crossing, since 9 a.m. this morning, but there seems to be still shootings or fire, like there still seems to be no ceasefire ongoing.
Yeah, that is good news that the Rafah gate is going to be open, supposedly, because these people have to be able to move somewhere to safety.
Yeah, right.
And stay tuned, because the border between Gaza and Egypt that we mentioned is expected to open today, allowing evacuees to begin crossing. We hear from an expert on the role Egypt plays in this conflict, so stick around.
Shen Yun Symphony Orchestra, coming to Lincoln Center, David Geffen Hall, October 22nd. Tickets at shenyunsymphony.com.
Is deep sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. That's why it's so important to choose a pure source of omega-3. Puritang Green Vegetable Omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds, which are rich in nutrients and minerals, especially vitamins A, D, E, calcium, and iron. With natural processing and no harmful chemical additives, it has more than 90% concentration of omegas 3, 6, 7, and 9. It effectively improves brain power and is beneficial to the heart's health. Puritang Omega-3 does not smell of fish and contains no pollutants, so both adults and children can safely and easily consume it over a long period of time. Puritang Green Vegetable Omega-3. Greener, healthier, and more effective. Visit puritang.com to learn more.
Introducing NutriBullet RX. NutriBullet RX uses breakthrough smart extraction technology to break down and open up foods like never before, giving us the most nutritious superfood drink ever, and get back to being healthy and well again.
My stomach issues literally went away.
My shoulder pain has gone.
I was able to sleep better at night.
I've lost 100 pounds.
During this TV offer, you can have the complete NutriBullet RX system rushed to your home for just 6 payments of only $29.99. You'll also receive this amazing bonus, the NutriBullet RX Hot Soup Maker. Just place it on the base, and the NutriBullet RX switches into soup mode to make hot, delicious, nutritious soup in an instant. You can have the complete NutriBullet RX system for just 6 payments of only $29.99. We'll ship the NutriBullet RX system right to your door for free. That's right, free shipping.
Revolutionary in his field, Dr. Bonatti created, perfected, and patented the Bonatti spine procedures. Using his genius, Bonatti invented the precise tools necessary to minimize surgery, scarring, anesthesia, and recovery. So successful are the Bonatti spine procedures, they consistently reflect 98.75% patient satisfaction. 75,000 procedures have been performed exclusively at our location. Nearly half our patients suffer from failed back and neck surgeries at other facilities. Bonatti succeeds where others fail.
Good to have you back. Egypt was expected to open the border crossing Rafah this morning, and to understand Egypt's role in this better, we're bringing in Alex Trayman. He's the CEO of Jerusalem Bureau Chief of Jewish News Syndicate. Good morning. Good to have you there. First, now people have been reportedly waiting at the border to Egypt for a while for passage, and a U.S. official reportedly said that Egypt wanted to bring in medical supplies. That was okay, but it didn't want necessarily accept fleeing civilians. Now, why do you think was Egypt hesitant on that end?
Well, of course, Egypt doesn't want to have Hamas in its borders. Egypt's concerned about its own security. When people accuse Israel of a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, they should understand that there's a 7-mile border to the south of Gaza with Egypt. And I do believe that Egypt should open up the Rafah crossing, and that diplomatic efforts from the United States and other countries should be focused on providing Gazans that flee the Strip and who rightly should flee the Strip to provide them with humanitarian aid, and then also to resettle as many Gazans as possible elsewhere, because I do believe that there are a lot of Gazans in the Strip that do want to be resettled elsewhere, and that life in the Strip will be much more difficult for them in the aftermath of an Israeli campaign than it even was before.
Now tell me more about the historical context here and the role Egypt has played. What is the relationship between Egypt and Palestine, or Hamas in this case?
Well, in Egypt, the Arab street, so to speak, is pretty anti-Semitic. They're against Israel, but the administration under El-Sisi has been very, very close to Israel. There's a lot of security coordination between the two countries. Egypt has historically also served as a negotiator between Egypt and Hamas during the various conflicts, and I'm certain that the Egyptians are playing a role also in mediating to try to help secure a prisoner, a hostage release of Israelis that have been taken hostage in the Strip. So Egypt definitely has a historic role here, and they have a very important role to play here now, particularly in helping to find a solution for Gazans that need humanitarian assistance.
Right, and I also want to touch on one thing, which is the Muslim Brotherhood. Some were referring to that as a threat to Egypt. Now, how does this come into play in the situation?
Well, exactly. In Egypt, you saw how the country was quickly overtaken after Hosni Mubarak left in the Arab Spring by the Muslim Brotherhood. And Egypt was very, very fortunate that El-Sisi took over in what basically amounted to a military coup. And they've made it illegal for the Muslim Brotherhood to operate in Egypt. Of course, Hamas is a sister of the Muslim Brotherhood. And Israel should take a similar approach that Egypt has taken, which is a no-tolerance policy towards radicals like the Muslim Brotherhood and like Hamas.
I think maybe it needs a little bit more context here. What is the relationship between the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas?
These are part of the same organization. Hamas is literally a sister of it's the southern chapter, the Israeli southern chapter of the Muslim Brotherhood. They are connected. All of these terror entities are somewhat connected, not just in ideology, but also in terms of coordination. And now we're even seeing coordination not only between Sunni organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas, but also with Shiite organizations like Hezbollah in Iran.
Interesting. And you just touched on the important role that Egypt played regarding the negotiations. Just go into a bit more detail for me about that. What role exactly does Egypt play in the negotiations between Israel and Hamas and the Gaza Strip at this point?
Well, again, historically, it's been Hamas that has brokered ceasefires between Hamas and Israel in previous rounds of violence. However, this round of violence is unlike previous rounds of violence. This isn't just rocket fire from northern Gaza into Israeli population centers that Israel can deal with its Iron Dome. Here we had over 1,300 killed, and the Israeli populace has woken up and is no longer willing to accept the atrocities and the attacks perpetrated for many years by Hamas. And so the IDF is now planning a ground invasion, which is historic. In previous contexts, Israel did not send troops on the ground into the Gaza Strip. So I don't think that Egypt is going to be able to prevent Israel from moving in to the Strip at this time. And their role now should really be focused on solving the humanitarian issue, the crisis that is quickly developing, and to try to get as many Gazans resettled as possible.
Thank you so much for your insights on this, Alex Trayman. I really appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And President Biden said on Sunday that the Hamas terrorist group must be eliminated entirely. But the president also called for a path to a Palestinian state. NTD's Daniel Monahan has the latest on the U.S. response to the war in Israel.
The number of Americans killed in the Hamas terror attacks now stands at 29. 14 are still missing. President Biden addressed possible hostages among them on 60 Minutes.
And we're going to do everything in our power to find those who are still alive and set them free.
Biden says he doesn't think American troops would be necessary on the ground, as Israel has one of the finest fighting forces. This as American warships headed to the area amid growing clashes on Israel's northern border with Lebanon. President Biden spoke with Palestinian Authority President Abbas on Saturday. Biden condemned Hamas's brutal attack on Israel and reiterated that Hamas does not stand for the Palestinian people's right to dignity and self-determination. The two discussed U.S. efforts to work with the UN, Egypt, Jordan, Israel, and others to ensure humanitarian supplies reach civilians in Gaza. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has invited Biden to visit Israel soon, but the White House hasn't announced any concrete plans. Secretary of State Antony Blinken held talks Sunday with the Egyptian president about the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. Blinken promised a corridor from Gaza to Egypt will remain open for Palestinians to escape the Israeli bombing of Hamas targets currently underway. Blinken has met with other Middle East leaders and says there is a consensus to contain the outbreak of violence.
Well, first, there's a determination in every country I went to make sure that this conflict doesn't spread.
Blinken says President Biden has repeatedly warned any state or non-state actors not to take advantage of the situation.
And we've backed up those words with concrete actions, including the deployment now of our two largest aircraft carrier battle groups to the region. That's not meant as a provocation, it's meant as a deterrent.
The U.S. warships will station themselves in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. The first carrier strike group, the USS Gerald R. Ford, arrived off the coast of Israel earlier this week, and now the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower will join. A group of U.S. senators visited Tel Aviv on Sunday to show their support to Israel during the war with Hamas. Senator Jackie Rosen says her visit to Tel Aviv and meeting with those who have lost family, friends, and loved ones deeply impacted her.
I'm here to tell the world this is real. This is real. Do not look away.
Senator Mitt Romney says Palestinians in Gaza are being killed because of Hamas, not because of Israel.
Hamas is holding their own population, the Palestinian population, as human shields.
Senator Bill Cassidy shared one family's story.
It's hard to imagine that the good news, the news that makes you happy, is that your terribly wounded son is now alive, being held captive in Gaza.
Israel is expected to launch ground action in Gaza soon. The U.S. Embassy is warning any Americans in Gaza to immediately evacuate south. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And now for some short headlines from around the world. Police evacuated two popular tourist sites in Paris over the weekend. The Louvre Museum and the Palace of Versailles both received bomb threats. Unrest in Paris prompted the deployment of 7,000 officers to protect public places across the country. The action followed a fatal school stabbing by an alleged Islamic extremist.
The western Afghanistan region of Herat province was hit by its fourth major earthquake in just over a week yesterday. The biggest tremor registered 6.3 on the Richter scale. Thousands have been killed or injured in the series of quakes. Residents are unsure when the earthquakes will stop and have left the area to live in tents to avoid danger.
An EU commissioner has given Elon Musk and X a warning about illegal content and disinformation related to the Israel-Hamas conflict. The EU commissioner also sent warnings to YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. X-CEO Linda Yaccarino responded saying the platform has taken down hundreds of accounts associated with Hamas.
Many countries, including Canada, have citizens trapped in the escalating conflict in Gaza. Roughly 300 Canadian citizens and their families contacted the Canadian government asking for help. Canadian authorities say the task is complex. Officials are communicating with allies and the UN to support the departures. And first of all, our hearts go out to all those victims of the Afghanistan earthquake.
Yes, definitely. And hopefully those Canadians will be able to move through the Rafah Gate and safely seek refuge in Egypt.
Right. And I mean, the Canadian government has been contacting the Egyptian counterparts to assist them in leaving. So
yeah, that's good. And I mean, you know, when we talk about Hamas using civilians as human shields, the IDF actually found a report that showed that Hamas was confiscating the Gazans' personal belongings, preventing them from fleeing.
That's right, yeah.
So you can imagine why they would want them to stay there as cover.
Good input, thank you.
So we're going to go to break now. Congressman Jim Jordan faces stiff resistance as he vies for speakership. But if not him, then who can gain enough support? And can the Senate send aid to Israel without the House, like Senator Schumer suggests? We hear from an analyst.
And Senate Leader Chuck Schumer vows to push military aid through Congress as fast as possible as Israeli forces continue battling Hamas terrorists.
The FBI warns of an increase in terrorist threats in the U.S. linked to the Israel-Hamas war as controversy erupts over calls to accept Gazan refugees.
Another Iranian special interest alien arrested after illegally crossing the U.S.-Mexico border, bringing the total up to 4 so far this month. That story and more after the break.
One in 5 children worldwide are faced with the reality of living without food. No family dinners, no special treats, no full bellies. All around the world, parents are struggling to feed their children. Toddlers are suffering from acute malnutrition, which stunts their growth. Kids are forced to drop out of school so they can help support their families. COVID, conflict, inflation, and climate have ignited the worst famine in our lifetime. And we're fed up. Fed up with the fact that hunger robs children of their childhood. Fed up with the lack of progress. Fed up with the injustice. Help us brighten the lives of children all over the world by visiting getfedupnow.org. For as little as $10 a month, you can join Save the Children as we support children and families in desperate need of our help. Now is the time to get fed up and give back. When you join the cause, your $10 monthly donation can help communities in need of life-saving treatments and nutrients. Prevent children from dropping out of school. Support our work with communities and governments to help children go from short-term surviving to long-term thriving. And now, thanks to special government grants, every dollar you give before December 31st can multiply up to 10 times the impact. That means more food, water, medicine, and help for kids around the world. You'll also receive a free tote bag to share your support for children in need. Childhood without food is unimaginable. Get fed up. Call us now or visit getfedupnow.org today.
Bars should lock up criminals, not your back. Don't get the shakedown from lesser spine surgeons who utilize screws, rods, and disc replacements. At Bonatti, no hardware is ever used. 65% of patients come to us after receiving failed back and neck surgery at other facilities. With 98.75% patient-reported satisfaction, you don't have to be a prisoner to your pain. Bonatti succeeds where others fail. Visit AskBonatti.com.
It's all good, baby.
Is it really all good?
If you love me enough to routinely test your handyman skills, not to mention the strength of your marriage, then of course you'll visit nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat to make sure I'm in the right car seat.
Welcome back. Tensions on Capitol Hill continue as the House remains paralyzed without a speaker. Late Friday afternoon, Congressman Jim Jordan won a secret ballot to be the Republicans' new nominee, just one day after Majority Leader Steve Scalise dropped his bid. The question now is whether Jordan has the support needed to win the gavel. Here's more.
The runner-up from Wednesday's vote, Representative Jim Jordan, is now the new nominee after beating Georgia Representative Austin Scott in a closed-door vote.
Well, we got 2 days to lobby and make phone calls to understand why people aren't there quite yet.
After failing to coalesce behind Steve Scalise for House Speaker, it's not clear whether Jim Jordan, who came in second to Scalise in an internal party ballot Wednesday, can get enough support either.
If he can't get 217, there's going to be a new candidate.
Any candidate needs to win a majority of the entire House to be elected Speaker, which is 217 votes right now. That means a Speaker nominee can only afford to lose 4 Republican votes if all are present and voting. Democrats expected to give uniform backing to House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. Some Republicans eager to put the messy internal politics behind them and get back to work as fighting rages between Israel and Hamas and a U.S. government funding deadline looms in 5 weeks.
The problem has been consistently that we've allowed emotion to get in the way of logic and in the way of the necessity to actually govern. I did not come here to be emotional. I came here to govern, and the quicker we get past that, the better off we are.
CNN reported yesterday that a number of House Republicans are planning to block Jordan's path to speakership. One unnamed congressman told the outlet he believes there are roughly 40 no votes. House Republicans are expected to meet behind closed doors this evening. The House Speaker vote is set for Tuesday at noon.
And we're going to get some analysis on the scramble to select a Speaker of the House. Joining us live is Lenny McAllister, a political analyst and senior fellow with the Commonwealth Foundation. Lenny, it's always great to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning, as always.
So who are the holdouts and what are they looking for?
Primarily the moderate Republicans, and what they're looking for is a sense of stability and an opportunity to know that they're not going to go through this again. And it's not just being able to operate within the confines of the House of Representatives. Those are also the most vulnerable Republicans going into 2024. So those that are on the extreme, they're in well gerrymandered districts where they can stay in Congress for another 3, 4, 5 terms if they'd like. It's those vulnerable Republicans, the very Republicans, by the way, that gave the Republican Party this very slim majority going out of the 2022 elections into 2023. that are going to feel the squeeze the most. They're the ones that are going to have to answer to the constituents. They're the ones that are going to have to go after the swing voter. They are the ones that will likely be voted out of office after all this in 2024 and beyond.
So what do establishment Republicans have to do with this?
Well, I think what the establishment Republicans have to do is they want a sense of order. They want to not have this ever happen again. Look, this was part of the criticism in January, putting this caveat out there that in order for McCarthy to become Speaker in the first place, they would have this escape hatch that only a small amount of Republicans could use to bounce him out of the Speaker's office, and that's exactly what happened. I think those establishment Republicans knew it was a mistake then. They want to never see this happen again. They see it as an embarrassment, but they also see that after years of gains in the House of Representatives as a party, from the 90s on through, they're looking at going back to a time where the Democrats just basically controlled the House of Representatives and only Republicans play would be the Senate. This is something that's at risk now because of this behavior over the last several weeks.
I want to get to that embarrassment that you touch on in just a moment, but there are Republicans that are growing frustrated here, and some are even openly saying they don't think anyone can get to 217. So if not Jordan, then who?
The very interesting thing is they may have to go back to where they came from. They're going to need a compromise candidate, whether it's McCarthy or somebody else, somebody that's seen as a moderate that the Democrats will tolerate. The Republicans, at this point in time, they're so fracturalized, they're not going to like any one person. You probably have 3 or 4 different groups going on within the Republican caucus in the House. They're going to have to pick a compromise candidate, which is basically what they did in January. And this is going to be a very hard lesson for Republicans. And this is something that happened with the Tea Party movement during President Obama's tenure coming out of 2010. You can win elections. If you don't know how to govern and get along with yourselves, you can never make the change that you're looking to make. And this is another lesson that Republicans are learning. I think they're going to have to go back to a McCarthy type of candidate, somebody that a lot of people don't like, but somebody that the Democrats will tolerate. And what the Republicans have taught the Democrats at this point in time is they don't need to work with Republicans. They can keep this stalemate as long as they want, try to force something and broker something where they get a lot more power out of this once it's all said and done.
Well, McCarthy has floated that rerun, and he's done it once, so we'll have to see, and it would be curious to know exactly what the hardliners would demand of him. But Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is suggesting that they can send aid to Israel through the Senate without the House. Is this possible?
I'm sure that they're going to use some type of legislative and regulatory circus maneuvers, if you will, to try to get around this. Of course, the executive, when it comes to certain police powers and supporting of allies, can do certain things when it comes to resources without necessarily declaring war or sending boots on the ground. I think this is one of the reasons why you have somebody as experienced as Chuck Schumer in the Senate. There are ways that they can get something out there. And I think the Senate, being the higher chamber, quote unquote, is understanding that they can't allow the stalemate in the House of Representatives to delay things when it comes to Israel. And Israel, at least, is a bipartisan issue. This is something that both sides of the aisle support in regards to making sure Israel has the resources and support that it needs to push back Hamas and make sure that they can get stability on the ground after the horrible attacks of 9 days ago.
Right. So how does this lack of a speaker, we talked on embarrassment, affect the GOP in their public image?
It shows them as being a very regionalized and fractionalized party. This is, again, going to be a party that's going to have a hard time winning anything that looks purple. And if there are presidential candidates that think that the fight in the House of Representatives is not going to affect them in 2024, they're wrong. If they go into a deep red state, if you're not supporting Jim Jordan, you're likely to lose that primary state or at least slide to 2nd, 3rd, 4th place. If you're going into a purple state and you're supporting somebody like a Jim Jordan, you're supporting all of what's been going on over the last 2 weeks, you're more likely to lose that state as well, because those states, your Pennsylvanias, even your North Carolinas, states that could be in play at the presidential level in 2024, those are where those swing voters reside. Those are the ones that are most ticked off with Congress acting in this way and getting the American people to this state.
Fascinating insight from you. Lenny McAllister, political analyst. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. God bless you all.
And as the struggle to find a new House Speaker continues, Senate Leader Chuck Schumer says the Senate will push through military aid to Israel as soon as possible for its war against the Hamas terrorist group. Here's Schumer yesterday speaking in Tel Aviv.
We say to Israel, America will stand with its ally Israel. So we will work with the Israeli government and the Biden administration to assemble the most generous package possible. Now, people will ask, what about the House? We're not waiting for the House.
Schumer on Sunday said among Israel's requests are additional interceptors for its Iron Dome missile defense system, which has been operating nonstop, shooting down Hamas rockets from Gaza, and precision munitions.
The needs, of course, are quickly evolving over time.
He also said he urged Israeli leaders to assist with efficient humanitarian assistance while minimizing civilian casualties in Gaza.
The Biden administration has underscored that democracies like ours are stronger and more secure when we uphold the rule of law. We echoed that to the Prime Minister of Israel and to every Israeli official we met. We told them that as well as military assistance, intelligence assistance, diplomatic assistance, we wanted humanitarian assistance. And I said to them, find the fastest, safest, and most efficient way to do so. We also told them it was really important and it's difficult. We know it's difficult, but still we have to minimize civilian casualties.
Also on Sunday, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said the Biden administration hopes to push a new weapons package for Israel and Ukraine through Congress that will be significantly higher than $2 billion. But how any bill moves through Congress, currently without a speaker in the U.S. House of Representatives, is unclear.
At one point yesterday, Schumer and other senators were forced to take shelter amid rocket fire. Schumer wrote on social media, quote, "While in Tel Aviv today, our delegation was rushed to a shelter to wait out rockets sent by Hamas." In his words, it shows you what Israelis have to go through.
Right. And it's incredibly expensive, right? One Iron Dome missile costs around $60,000.
Yeah, and then Hamas, these rockets they use are only $600.
Right, and that shows you the asymmetry because I guess those Hamas's rockets, they don't have to be precise. There is this interesting picture where the Hamas's rockets, they just draw circles in the sky. They don't look like they have a specific target. Whereas the Iron Dome missile, of course, it has to be a very high-tech one because then they have to precisely intercept and calculate where they go.
Yeah, and that's some of the reasons why Hamas is criticized for having blatant disregard for human life, because they don't even know where their rockets are going.
Right.
Yep. So we're going to move on here. The FBI is warning about domestic threats linked to the Israel-Hamas war. At the same time, controversy has erupted over calls for the U.S. to accept Gaza refugees. Here's the story.
FBI Director Christopher Wray stated there has been an increase in reported threats since Hamas launched attacks on Israel. Wray emphasized the evolving threat and the possibility of foreign terrorists inciting attacks on U.S. soil. He urged law enforcement to be vigilant, especially for lone actors who may be inspired by recent events. Wray offered condolences to Israel and condemned anti-Semitism, highlighting the need to confront threats both domestically and abroad. This warning comes as Israeli military leaders announced preparations for a ground invasion of Hamas-controlled Gaza. Police departments in major U.S. cities are on high alert amid fears of violence during pro-Palestinian demonstrations, monitoring key locations with extra attention to synagogues and mosques in Chicago. This after a synagogue in a Chicago suburb was forced to evacuate last week after receiving a bomb threat. No credible threat was found. Capitol Police in Washington plan to enhance security at the complex, and in New York City, law enforcement presence is increased. At the same time, controversy is brewing over calls for the U.S. to accept Gaza refugees. Experts predict that up to 1 million individuals may flee the region, as Israel has urged the mass evacuation of Gaza ahead of a planned offensive against Hamas. Representative Jamal Bowman has called for the U.S. to welcome refugees from Palestine. In contrast, Representative Tom Tiffany has introduced legislation to block Palestinians with passports from entering the country. He argues that the Biden administration should not repeat the mistake of allowing unvetted Afghan refugees into the U.S. Other Republicans, including Senator Marco Rubio and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, oppose accepting Gaza refugees, citing concerns about terrorism and the country's ability to secure its own borders, saying that neighboring Arab nations should open their borders and take them in. The Israeli military has said it'll make extensive efforts to avoid harming civilians while it carries out operations in Gaza in the coming days.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection says it apprehended a fourth Iranian special interest alien since the beginning of the month.
Fox News reports the latest apprehension happened yesterday morning in Eagle Pass, Texas.
The four Iranians are considered special interest because they are from countries the U.S. says promote terrorism or pose potential national security threats.
Migrants with this designation are subjected to stricter vetting and questioning after being apprehended. Last week, Border Patrol agents detained 2 Lebanese nationals in Eagle Pass who were also considered special interest aliens.
Agents have apprehended 19 Iranians and 17 Syrians since Monday in the separate Rio Grande Valley sector. Senator Ted Cruz has highlighted the influx of illegal immigrants at the southern border, including those on the terror watch list. Customs and border officials have apprehended individuals from Lebanon and Syria in Texas.
Yeah, it just goes to show you the importance of having a secure border, especially when there's a conflict like this happening.
Exactly, because that now raises the question, because the border is so overwhelmed, how many more went in without being noticed?
Right, and if vetting is already hard enough as it is, you can imagine what it's going to lead to in that scenario. So we're going to go to break here. Social media is being flooded with graphic scenes of war and terror carried out by Hamas. Find out how parents can protect their kids from graphic online content in just a moment.
Stay tuned to get 2 rolls of alien tape free. You wouldn't stick your mother-in-law on the wall, but you could with alien tape. It just sticks. Just peel and stick to make anything stay in place quick. Brick, pavers, marble, tile, plastic, even leather. Nothing works better than alien tape. You wouldn't stick your fishbowl on a moving car, but you could with alien tape. The secret is nano-stick technology that grabs and locks on to secure one side of the surface to the other. Alien tape secures in seconds, then twist, pull, and rinse to reuse. Call or go online to get your first roll of alien tape for just $19.99, plus shipping and processing. But to make this deal really stick, we'll give you 2 more rolls absolutely free. You get 3 rolls of alien tape for one low price. Order now.
To order, call 1-800-490-1364 or go to tryalientape.com. So call 1-800-490-1364 or order online at tryalientape.com.
Hi, everyone watching at home. We're here to remind you that if you or someone you know were injured in an accident that was not your fault, listen up. We have live agents available right now to answer your questions and tell you how much your case is potentially worth. Hi, I'm Gina Bellich, here with spokesman and TV personality Tom Mustin with us in the Help Center. So Tom, phones are really busy over there. Tell us what kind of calls you're seeing.
Well, Gina, first off, thank you for having me here in the call center with you. We always enjoy talking to the viewers and getting folks the compensation that they deserve. You know, we're seeing calls about all kinds of accidents, but the most common by far has been car accidents. So if you or someone you know were injured in an accident that was not your fault, give us a call right now. You'll speak with a live person. They'll answer any questions you have and tell you if you have a case and how much your case is potentially worth.
Thanks, Tom. All right, folks at home, you heard it. Take advantage of this opportunity and call now.
My name's Jen Marshall. I've been playing professional football in the Women's League for 3 years now. We're about 3.5 weeks out of my second surgery now. I had no pain whatsoever, no tingling, no numbness, and I felt incredible. I'm able to do pretty much anything. He doesn't want me pushing it too much, but I'm able to do, assisted pull-ups now. I'm riding a bike. I'm walking continuously at an incline on treadmills. I can do push-ups again. I can get out of bed, no problem. You're in great hands.
Bonatti succeeds where others fail.
You're not gonna get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff.
Mama!
Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat.
Good to have you back. Many schools, psychologists, and safety groups are urging parents to disable their children's social media apps.
This over concerns the Hamas terrorist group may spread graphic videos of hostages captured in the Israel conflict.
Here with us live is NTD business host Don Ma. Don, to the rescue. Don, how do parents protect their young kids from seeing potentially graphic content online?
Yeah, Evelyn, I think this is something very important for parents to consider because, there's some very scary images and video online that maybe even disturbing for adults, let alone young children. That's videos like hostages taken on the streets, civilians wounded. So if your young kids are online at this time as the conflict in the Middle East continues, you can consider disabling social media apps or implementing some sort of restrictions like filtering out certain words and phrases on their phones. I think potentially this is worth the time for parents to be more involved at this time. Because, the American Psychological Association has even issued a serious warning, about the psychological impacts of exposure to violence on social media on kids, when regarding to the war in Israel and Hamas.
That is such a good point, Don. And parents can even talk to their kids about this, some experts say, and just try to help them understand what's out there and what they should be aware of and keep away from. So can you walk us through some of the specific steps that parents can take to prevent these young kids from seeing potentially disturbing content?
Yeah, you're right, Kevin. So on iPhones, parents can use the screen time function to limit kids' use on their phone. This function lets you decide the type of content that appears on their devices, and it also lets you block inappropriate content as well. And even online, this feature can let you automatically filter website content to limit their access. Parents can also set up guardrails directly within social media apps. So let's say TikTok, for example, right? It offers a family pairing feature. And this feature lets you restrict kids' ability to actually search for content. That means you can limit content that may not be appropriate for them, or you can actually even filter out videos with certain words or hashtags from showing up in their feeds. And another tip is, it's very important to do your own research and keep up with new updates and functionalities of social media apps. Parents at this time may even want to consider, keeping kids completely off social media, at least until the war's over.
Wow, filtering hashtags, that's new to me, but that's already really helpful. Do you have anything else for us, Don?
Yeah, sure. Just one business update, and it's a big one, it seems. Drug retailer Rite Aid filed for bankruptcy yesterday. Lenders have agreed to provide over $3 billion to facilitate liquidity during restructuring. So decreased sales to online retailers and lawsuits are factors in this bankruptcy. The Department of Justice and others also filed lawsuits alleging Rite Aid filled thousands of illegal opioid and fentanyl prescriptions. So of course, Rite Aid has denied the allegations. Just one quick update from me.
So, Don, do you think that it's a good idea to buy Walgreens stock right now if Rite Aid's going under? Because business has to go somewhere.
Well, I don't really like to recommend which stocks to buy on this platform for our viewers. If they want professional help, they can seek some other advisors here. But, you might have a point here, but, we'll let viewers find their advisors to talk about this.
Yeah, well, we saw what happened with Yellow when that went under and all the diversion of that business to other trucking
I'm
firms.
sure there is a lot of different things to keep their eyes on and other factors to keep the eyes on as well.
Yeah, Rite Aid, too bad. It's where I bought my contact solution.
Well, I hope you'll find a different... well, we won't keep you too long, Don. Thank you so much for your updates today.
All right, no worries. Bye-bye.
And we're going to switch up gears here and bring you some of the latest headlines.
An Illinois man was arrested for allegedly stabbing a 6-year-old Muslim boy to death and wounding his mother. Officials said yesterday that the victim The victims were targeted for their religion and in response to the war between Israel and Hamas. Joseph Suba was charged with first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, 2 counts of hate crime, and other charges.
Former Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry won his bid to be the governor of the Pelican State. He's the first Republican to hold the office in 8 years. Landry trounced the competition in his off-year election by receiving almost 52% of the vote. This was about double the combined votes of 13 other candidates, including 6 Republicans. So no runoff will be required. Louisiana has a jungle primary system, meaning all contenders are on the same ballot. If any candidate gets 50% or more of the primary tally, they win. Otherwise, the top 2 vote-getters would move to a runoff.
Good to have you back. It's been a year since one man stood up against the authoritarian rule of the Chinese Communist Party and its leader, Xi Jinping. Peng Lifan, known as the Bridgeman, has now been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. House China Committee Chairman Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin made the nomination. He called the event a story of courage and cowardice. On October 13th last year, Mr. Peng strung up banners on Sitong Bridge over Beijing's bustling Third Ring Road. This was during the communist regime's 3-year draconian COVID-19 lockdowns. The banners read, "We don't want COVID tests, we want food. We don't want cultural revolution, we want reform. We don't want lockdowns, we want freedom. We don't want an autocrat, we want votes. We don't want lies, we want dignity. We are citizens, not slaves." The video of Mr. Peng's one-man protest went viral. It ignited protests across China, leading to the CCP eventually abandoning the lockdowns and restrictions in December 2022. Over the weekend, many overseas Chinese in cities worldwide held rallies in front of Chinese consulates, shouting slogans against the CCP's authoritarian rule and calling for the release of Mr. Peng. His whereabouts are still unknown since his arrest a year ago. And on the topic of China, Falun Gong practitioners in Philadelphia held a rally yesterday celebrating the more than 400 million Chinese quitting the Chinese Communist Party and its affiliated organizations. Some local officials showed their support and attended the rally. NTD's Costa Menes has more on the event and the public's response.
Local Falun Gong practitioners gathered in Chinatown on Sunday. The rally, which offered congratulations to the 420 million Chinese who have quit the Chinese Communist Party and its youth groups, received much of the public's support.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's a very noble thing you're doing. I love the Chinese people, the Chinese American, and the Chinese people are such a humble, good people. And this is very noble what you're doing.
The peaceful Tuidang or Quit the Party movement was inspired by a series of articles, including the 9 commentaries on the Communist Party published by the Epoch Times in November 2004, which exposes the crimes of the CCP. The movement has allowed Chinese people around the globe to break free from the regime's statewide propaganda machine, as well as nearly 75 years of brutal oppression that has deprived the Chinese people of their spiritual heritage and basic human rights. The CCP has killed an estimated 80 million Chinese through multiple campaigns, such as the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution and the Tiananmen Square Massacre, as well as the ongoing persecutions of Christians, Uyghurs, Tibetans and Falun Gong practitioners. Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, is a peaceful spiritual practice based on the universal principles of truth, compassion and forbearance. Practitioners have suffered persecution since the practice was banned by former CCP leader Jiang Zemin in 1999. The persecution is ongoing and includes forced organ harvesting.
I can't believe this is going on. This is such an evil world. It's heartbreaking. This is very heartbreaking that human beings are treated like this. But it's good to know that people are standing up and still fighting fearlessly. You have to be fearless.
The rally was also attended by a Pennsylvania state senator who gave a short speech.
Organ harvesting shouldn't be happening any place in the world. No living person should be killed in order to for their organs. And so certainly To the extent that's happening, that's terrible. And to the extent the Chinese government isn't stopping it, it should.
Pennsylvania State Representative Mary Isaacson issued a citation, which highlights growing awareness of the CCP's imminent threat to the world and brings attention to the importance of stopping the tyranny of communist China and ending the CCP's global threat. Rallies were also held in other parts of the country, including Brooklyn, New York. Kost Jimenez, NTD News.
It's a few seconds until 8, so we are starting off the second part of our broadcast now. The latest updates on the Israel-Hamas war. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken meets with Israel's Prime Minister in Jerusalem as Hamas terrorists block citizens of Gaza from evacuating.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken promises a corridor from Gaza to Egypt will remain open for Palestinians to escape. Meanwhile, President Biden has some tough words on the future of Hamas.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi criticizes Israel's actions against Palestine as pressure mounts for China to release an official stance on the Israel-Hamas war.
Immigrants dubbed special interest aliens have been illegally crossing into the U.S. This month alone, authorities detained 4 Iranians with that designation. Welcome back, and to all those joining us now, good morning. I'm Kevin Hogan.
Good morning from me as well. I'm Evelyn Lee. We're heading right to our top news today. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken returned to Israel today. That's after several days of shuttle diplomacy between Arab states to mitigate risks of the war becoming a greater conflict. Blinken has started his meetings with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's also set to meet with President Isaac Herzog, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and opposition leader Yair Lapid. As Israel renews its call for civilians in the north of Gaza to move south, Hamas has been actively blocking civilians from leaving. The IDF says it killed multiple Hamas commanders this weekend, including the leader of the October 7th attacks, Ali Khadi.
Citizens in northern Israel near Lebanon are being evacuated. That's according to a joint announcement from Israel's Ministry of Defense and the IDF this morning. Residents living within 1.25 miles of the border are being moved to state-funded guest houses.
That's after Iran-backed terrorist group Hezbollah claimed responsibility for multiple anti-tank missile attacks on an IDF post over the weekend. One Israeli civilian was killed. Military casualties were also reported. And China has chosen to remain on the sidelines during the Israel-Hamas war, but many believe that the communist regime is subtly siding with Palestine. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi told his Saudi Arabia counterpart in a phone call on Sunday that Israel's actions have gone beyond self-defense. This after Israel's foreign minister criticized China for their lack of condemnation on the terrorist attack carried out by Hamas. Wang also spoke with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Saturday. He reiterated China's stance on the war, saying they opposed all actions that harm civilians and condemning practices that violate international law, but did not mention Hamas by name. And joining me now to dive deeper into China's role in this is Antonio Graceffo. He's a China analyst and author. Good to have you. Good morning, Antonio. Now first, China, for one, an atheist regime and also oppressing Uyghurs and their faith inside China, calling them terrorists and all. Why are they supporting Hamas and the Palestinian cause?
China is the world's largest importer of oil, and they're very much dependent on the Middle East, obviously, for oil. And they are trying to build cachet in the Middle East, trying to present themselves to the world as a friend of the Muslim people.
So is that working out like that? Are they able to position themselves as a friend to the Muslim people in this way?
I think what happened initially, Xi Jinping may actually have believed that he could have made peace between Iran and Israel. And I think that the game he's playing now is that he's decided to just write Israel off, not make any attempt to include Israel, and then try and build a coalition of Arab states around China. Now, you asked, is it successful? I think in a way that they're winning a bit of a propaganda war, but I don't know that it will have any substantive impact.
And China seems to generally keep close ties with extremist Islamic groups, like the Taliban being one of them, like we just recently heard. So why do you think that is? Do you think there is more to that than just positioning them as friends of the Muslim people?
Well, part of it is that China has to build a coalition, and China has lost Europe. Europe's firmly with the U.S. now. Southeast Asia is moving more and more toward the United States. So China has to find friends somewhere. So basically, China is picking up all of the heavily sanctioned countries, North Korea, Iran, Afghanistan. China is the only one reaching out to them. Afghanistan is completely dependent on China economically. And at the same time, then China is able to spin that and say, oh, look, the U.S. bombed Afghanistan, but we, China, we love Afghanistan because we love the Muslim people, and they're using that for propaganda.
Interesting. And at the same time, though, I've spoken to a couple of experts on this, and there were multiple people that were talking about this opening up a possibility for China to make a move in Taiwan. Now, how does this conflict in the Middle East help China in this regard?
Yeah, the three major conflicts that the U.S. is supporting are all very important, and they need to have continued funding. That would be Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. And all three are getting lumped together now because there's a lot of argument within the U.S. government about budgets, how much money to allocate to each of these causes, and all three are equally important because if we lose Ukraine, if we lose Taiwan, or if we lose Israel, then we are showing the world that we're an unreliable partner, and China will use that as propaganda. If you recall, when the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan, China immediately started sending messages to Taiwan saying, you see, the United States is an unreliable partner. They're not going to fight for you. So it's very important for us to continue to support Taiwan.
Understood. And there are also reports that say that Hamas used Chinese tech to breach the border into Israel. So there is a lot of things going on also, of course, like behind the scenes. So bottom line here, how closely do you think China is involved and has interest in all of this conflict?
Well, China supports Iran economically. Iran's completely dependent on China economically. And then the Iranian state is then training Hamas and Hezbollah, giving them weapons, giving them material support. Hamas gets about 70% of their economic funding from Iran. And so China is at least inadvertently supporting these groups indirectly. But at the end of the day, as I said, I really believe there's been a shift in what Xi Jinping is trying to achieve in the Middle East, because a lot of the media were saying that the Hamas attack on Israel has undermined China's efforts in the Middle East because China was trying to broker peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel. But I think that China has just changed directions, and this Hamas attack is perfect for them. And Israel's reaction also works well then in China's favor, because China can show all those pictures to the world. They can accuse Israel of human rights violations. They can then isolate Israel the same way that they isolated Taiwan in the world community, or at least that's their goal, and then to bring all the Muslim countries on board with China.
So they're also able to take this as their advantage. Thank you so much, Antonio Graceffo. As always, good insights. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Stay with us. Her parents' home was burned to the ground, her close friend shot to death. A woman from a violently hit kibbutz explains the Hamas terror attacks.
House Republicans nominate Congressman Jim Jordan to be the next speaker as tensions in the House increase. That's after the break.
Does this look familiar? You probably think this is what owning hearing aids would be like. Let me tell you, there's a better way. The Atom by Audion Hearing. The all-new Audion Atom is the world's first wireless charging hearing aid under $100. The Atom comes with an easy-to-use wireless charging dock. Plus, the Atom has a 22% smaller design, so it's nearly invisible when worn in the ear. That's why we have over 250,000 happy customers. Each pair has a 45-day money-back guarantee, so there is zero risk in trying them.
Call 1-800-918-3109. That's 1-800-918-3109. Call 1-800-918-3109 or go to audionhearing.com to get your pair of Audien Adam hearing aids for only $99.
Kindness is cool because we feel happier when we do good. Kindness connects us with others and improves our self-esteem. Simple actions, meaningful lives. Let's practice kindness, share our love, and show our care for one another. Submit videos of kindness to Gangjing World for prizes up to $10,000 in cash. For more information, visit gangjingworld.com.
I use Book a Limo on all my trips. They have drivers everywhere.
I always feel safe when I travel with their chauffeurs, from hello to goodbye.
Checking rates, booking, and managing clients' reservations online is so easy.
The confirmations, trip reminders, and car status updates are great when I'm on the go.
I want my clients to have the best experience during their trip. That's why I've used Book a Limo for the past 30 years.
What's your destination? Book a limo, any car, anywhere.
Shen Yun Creations, the streaming platform from Shen Yun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore shenyuncreations.com.
Welcome back. Tensions on Capitol Hill continue as the House remains paralyzed without a speaker. Late Friday afternoon, Congressman Jim Jordan won a secret ballot to be the Republicans' new nominee, just one day after Majority Leader Steve Scalise dropped his bid. The question now is whether Jordan has the support needed to win the gavel. We spoke to Lenny McAllister, a political analyst and senior fellow with the Commonwealth Foundation, to get some analysis on the scramble to select a Speaker of the House.
So who are the holdouts and what are they looking for?
Primarily the moderate Republicans, and what they're looking for is a sense of stability and an opportunity to know that they're not going to go through this again. And it's not just being able to operate within the confines of the House of Representatives. Those are also the most vulnerable Republicans going into 2024. So those that are on the extreme, they're in well gerrymandered districts where they can stay in Congress for another 3, 4, 5 terms if they'd like. It's those vulnerable Republicans, the very Republicans, by the way, that gave the Republican Party this very slim majority going out of the 2022 elections into 2023 that are going to feel the squeeze the most. They're the ones that are going to have to answer to the constituents. They're the ones that are going to have to go after the swing voter. They are the ones that will likely be voted out of office after all this in 2024 and beyond.
So what do established Republicans have to do with this?
Well, I think what the establishment Republicans have to do is they want a sense of order. They want to not have this ever happen again. Look, this was part of the criticism in January, putting this caveat out there that in order for McCarthy to become Speaker in the first place, they would have this escape hatch that only a small amount of Republicans could use to bounce him out of the Speaker's office, and that's exactly what happened. I think those establishment Republicans knew it was a mistake then. They want to never see this happen again. They see it as an embarrassment, but they also see that after years of gains in the House of Representatives as a party, from the 90s on through, they're looking at going back to a time where the Democrats just basically controlled the House of Representatives and only Republicans play would be the Senate. This is something that's at risk now because of this behavior over the last several weeks.
CNN reported yesterday that a number of House Republicans are planning to block Jordan's path to speakership. One unnamed congressman told the outlet he believes there are roughly 40 no votes. House Republicans are expected to meet behind closed doors this evening. The House Speaker vote is set for Tuesday at noon. And President Biden said on Sunday that the Hamas terrorist group must be eliminated entirely, but the president also called for a path to a Palestinian state. NTD's Daniel Monahan has the latest on the U.S. response to the war in Israel.
The number of Americans killed in the Hamas terror attacks now stands at 29. 14 are still missing. President Biden addressed possible hostages among them on 60 Minutes.
We're going to do everything in our power to find those who are still alive and set them free.
Biden says he doesn't think American troops would be necessary on the ground, as Israel has one of the finest fighting forces. This as American warships headed to the area amid growing clashes on Israel's northern border with Lebanon. President Biden spoke with Palestinian Authority President Abbas on Saturday. Biden condemned Hamas's brutal attack on Israel and reiterated that Hamas does not stand for the Palestinian people's right to dignity and self-determination. The two discussed U.S. efforts to work with the UN, Egypt, Jordan, Israel, and others to ensure humanitarian supplies reach civilians in Gaza. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has invited Biden to visit Israel soon, but the White House hasn't announced any concrete plans. Secretary of State Antony Blinken held talks Sunday with the Egyptian president about the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. Blinken promised a corridor from Gaza to Egypt will remain open for Palestinians to escape the Israeli bombing of Hamas targets currently underway. Blinken has met with other Middle East leaders and says there is a consensus to contain the outbreak of violence.
Well, first, there's a determination in every country I went to make sure that this conflict doesn't spread.
Blinken says President Biden has repeatedly warned any state or non-state actors not to take advantage of the situation.
And we've backed up those words with concrete actions, including the deployment now of our two largest aircraft carrier battle groups to the region. That's not meant as a provocation, it's meant as a deterrent.
The U.S. warships will station themselves in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. A group of U.S. senators visited Tel Aviv on Sunday to show their support to Israel during the war with Hamas. Senator Jackie Rosen says her visit to Tel Aviv and meeting with those who have lost family, friends, and loved ones deeply impacted her.
I'm here to tell the world this is real. This is real. Do not look away.
Senator Mitt Romney says Palestinians in Gaza are being killed because of Hamas, not because of Israel.
Hamas is holding their own population, the Palestinian population, as human shields.
Senator Bill Cassidy shared one family's story.
It's hard to imagine that the good news, the news that makes you happy, is that your terribly wounded son is now alive, being held captive in Gaza.
Israel is expected to launch ground action in Gaza soon. The U.S. Embassy is warning any Americans in Gaza to immediately evacuate south. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
The FBI is warning about domestic threats linked to the Israel-Hamas war. At the same time, controversy has erupted over calls for the U.S. to accept Gaza refugees. Here's the story.
FBI Director Christopher Wray stated there has been an increase in reported threats since Hamas launched attacks on Israel. Wray emphasized the evolving threat and the possibility of foreign terrorists inciting attacks on U.S. soil. He urged law enforcement to be vigilant, especially for lone actors who may be inspired by recent events. Wray offered condolences to Israel and condemned anti-Semitism, highlighting the need to confront threats both domestically and abroad. This warning comes as Israeli military leaders announced preparations for a ground invasion of Hamas-controlled Gaza. Police departments in major U.S. cities are on high alert amid fears of violence during pro-Palestinian demonstrations, monitoring key locations with extra attention to synagogues and mosques in Chicago. This after a synagogue in a Chicago suburb was forced to evacuate last week after receiving a bomb threat. No credible threat was found. Capitol Police in Washington plan to enhance security at the complex, and in New York City, law enforcement presence is increased. At the same time, controversy is brewing over calls for the U.S. to accept Gaza refugees. Experts predict that up to 1 million individuals may flee the region, as Israel has urged the mass evacuation of Gaza ahead of a planned offensive against Hamas. Representative Jamal Bowman has called for the U.S. to welcome refugees from Palestine. In contrast, Representative Tom Tiffany has introduced legislation to block Palestinians with passports from entering the country. He argues that the Biden administration should not repeat the mistake of allowing unvetted Afghan refugees into the U.S. Other Republicans, including Senator Marco Rubio and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, oppose accepting Gaza refugees, citing concerns about terrorism and the country's ability to secure its own borders, saying that neighboring Arab nations should open their borders and take them in. The Israeli military has said it'll make extensive efforts to avoid harming civilians while it carries out operations in Gaza in the coming days.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection says it apprehended a fourth Iranian special interest alien since the beginning of the month.
Fox News reports the latest apprehension happened yesterday morning in Eagle Pass, Texas.
The 4 Iranians are considered special interest because they are from countries the U.S. says promote terrorism or pose potential national security threats.
Migrants with this designation are subjected to stricter vetting and questioning after being apprehended. Last week, Border Patrol agents detained 2 Lebanese nationals in Eagle Pass who were also considered special interest aliens.
Agents have apprehended 19 Iranians and 17 Syrians since Monday in the separate Rio Grande Valley sector. And it's been a little over a week since the brutal Hamas attack on many Jewish communities.
NTD's Daniel Monahan spoke with a woman who grew up on one of the hardest hit kibbutzes.
Noah Shinar Ron grew up on the Kfar Aza kibbutz, one of the communities most violently attacked by Hamas terrorists. Her parents' home was burned down during the attack. The kibbutz is now a quarantine military zone, and nobody can go back there. Of the 600 people on the kibbutz at the time of the attack, Shinar Ron says 53 are dead, 27 missing, and 7 kidnapped. Those kidnapped include a mom and her 3 young kids.
She also had another child with her whose parents were murdered earlier, and that child ran to the house of a family that was later kidnapped. So it's a woman, and the child that ran to them is 3 years old, and the 3 other kids are also very young. So
one of Shinar Ron's friends was at home with her husband and kids when terrorists attacked the kibbutz. They took refuge in a bomb shelter at 6:30 in the morning.
They didn't take, phone chargers or anything because they're so used to bombing, they didn't think anything of it. But about 15 minutes later, they started hearing Arabic outside, and they realized that something's very wrong.
Her friend's husband sat there with his gun loaded near the door for 30 hours. They had no water, food, or electricity.
They needed to stay awake in case somebody tried to enter the shelter. They heard the terrorists inside their home. They were inside their house.
For a few hours, they were able to see community members communicating on WhatsApp groups.
There were people saying, "Help, they're inside the house. Help, they shot me. Help me, please send someone." And then these people slowly, one by one, they disappeared. And so they knew they were dying. And once they had no communication, she said to her husband, "Okay, let's open the door. Let's let them come in. Everybody's dead. We've been left behind."
Another close friend of Shinar Ron's was shot to death along with his wife and children. He had tried to shield them from terrorists' bullets with his body.
They found a very close friend of mine hugging his wife and 3 kids. They were all shot. They were all shot. So, a whole family. Yes. The 2 boys were, they were basketball players. They were meant to go national. They were all found in their home shelter on the bed, hugged together, with my friend covering them all with his body.
Shinar Ron takes issue with anyone trying to refer to Hamas as freedom fighters or a liberation organization.
I need them to really wake up and understand this is not the case. This is an organization whose entire focus is on killing Jews. They're not interested in building a Palestinian state. They're not interested in rehabilitating the Palestinian people. They're interested in killing Jews. That's their focus. And everyone who supports them basically supports that same ideology. So if you support Hamas, you're anti-Semitism. You're supporting anti-Semitism. You're supporting inhumane acts of murdering babies and burning down families and executing elderly people and raping young women.
Looking to the future, Shinar Rohn says the vision is to rebuild the kibbutz, to allow the community to one day live again. They've put together a fundraiser to take those first steps. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Well, but it's also good to know how to help here.
Yes.
It's absolutely incredible. And I heard, the rabbis now, they're working 24/7 to help identify the bodies, recover them. Even on Shabbat, which is very, very rare. You're not supposed to work on Shabbat, right? But they are because they're afraid that it will risk the families in question. Like, they just have to bring answers to the families, basically.
Yes, a very strong people. And, even a rabbi in Illinois that was in Jerusalem was saying that these are the most resilient people, the Israelis, having to pick up after something like this and move on. And, she touched on something interesting, how Hamas is not there to build up the Palestinian people, but instead to kill Jews. Well, we saw a video from Prager University that shows how if there is concrete sent in to that region in Gaza to build apartment buildings, Hamas will redirect that to build their tunnels and lay their terrorism infrastructure.
That's right, and now there is all these embargoes, right? So you got to ask, why are the embargoes? Because probably they didn't, the theory is that they didn't reach the people there, but instead went to the Hamas, which has extensive tunnels underground, which is a fact. All right. We are ending the show here. We'd love to hear from you at goodmorning@ntd.com, so shoot us an email if you'd like, if you have any feedback. Thanks for watching. I'm Evelyn Lee.
And I'm Kevin Hogan.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selective videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.